Hello, everyone. Good
Hello, hello.
morning. Happy afternoon. Wherever you are out in the world, we're super excited for you to be here.
Yes, welcome everybody to another Real Talk with Jill and Tia. We are excited to have you here today.
Yes, we are. And put in the comments where you are listening from. We love to hear who's out there and see where you're from. And again, this is a place to network even with people within food safety and quality. So having your comments on the stream just really you have the opportunity to reach out to other people that might also be on the call. So we're super excited to have you here. We're super excited you're joining us. Um, this is episode 4, Jill. So
I
we
can't
are like,
believe it. We're already on number 4.
I know, isn't it crazy? I remember the very first week you were kind of pulling me out of my shell. So
I think we
I'm
were both pulling
excited.
ourselves out of our shells because, right, the thought of like, hey, we should go live and do this every week was kind of like, wow, really? Like, are we? What will that look like? How will that be? And we're like, well, we know we have a lot that we can talk about and
Absolutely.
share.
Absolutely.
Here we
So
are.
we're excited to have you all for our episode 4. Today we're really talking about stepping into your role as a food safety and quality leader. And it seems simple once you get the opportunity to step into a leadership role because you're ready, right? Like you're ready for the role. You've probably been talking about it for months, maybe even sometimes years. You've shown that you're technically sound and you're ultimately ready to be that manager of people or be that broader leader. But what we oftentimes see is that food safety and quality leaders struggle because they haven't fully transitioned from being an executor to being a leader. So some words that kind of come to mind are like micromanager, right? So like if you have a leader that's a micromanager, or sometimes we complain that, man, our manager takes all my work. I do the work, and then my manager makes it seem like that they do the work. Those are the type of things we want to avoid as leaders, because they're roadblocks for us actually getting work done. And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to dig into how you can really step up into that leader role without making your team feel like you're a micromanager or that you're taking credit for their work or that you won't let them thrive so that they can eventually be leaders in the organization.
Right. And it's interesting because, at least for me and my story, right, when I moved into being a leader, it was one of those things that was kind of the expectation would happen next. Right. Because I had worked in the industry for a while. I had gone back for a master's. I had moved into a role that was a manager role.
Mm-hmm.
And people just thought, well, yeah, that's kind of the next step.
Right.
What I learned, and part of what we'll share here, right, is, there were many parts of me that were ready to be a leader, but there were definitely parts of me that were not developed enough to be the leader that I needed to be or could be. So that's
Absolutely.
so that's why I'm so glad that we talk about this, because it's not just yes or no, like I'm ready or I'm not ready. There are
Exactly.
there are different levels. And so, as you look at, your path and your journey and where you're going, sometimes leadership, like leading teams, might not
Mhm.
even be your sweet spot. So that's why I'm glad we're talking about this a little bit more today, so that people can feel more confident. They can be clear in what it looks like, or how to do this perhaps a little bit differently than maybe they've looked at it before.
Yeah, and I love that point because really the tips that we're going to talk about today, it's you could be a manager of people leader or you could be a technical leader in your organization.
Mhm.
And I feel like the tips still, they still stand. They're still applicable to your role as long as you're seen as a broader leader in the organization. These work whether or not you have a
Mhm.
team or whether or not you are indirectly influencing other teams.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hi, Carlos. We see you out there. Thank you for joining today. Please put in the comments to say hello to us so we can see you.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we can't. So please say hello in the comments and put where you're from, because we'd love to see that. So if this is your first episode with us, we are Tia and Jill, and we're super excited to be here for Real Talk Food Safety. We're really your go-to team for food safety and quality leadership and culture. So our business is really about building sustainable food safety cultures, not just programs. We believe and we know it starts with you, the
Mhm.
food safety and quality leader, the food safety and quality person on the team. You are the one that make sustainable food safety and cultures happen. So through our weekly LinkedIn Live, we go live every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time.
Mhm.
We're here to talk about how you do that, how to implement it, how to grow yourself as a leader, how to grow your teams, how to influence your teams. We're talking about it all. How to grow you technically, because we're really here to have this conversation with other food safety and quality professionals, so that we can get to the point that we do have sustainable food safety and quality cultures.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Tim, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tim.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know from even people in the audience, right, we've talked about that food safety and quality. We know it can be tough. And sometimes it can feel like we are pushing the rope, whether it's to get the resources that we need, whether it's to get people that we need, whatever it is, sometimes that feels like pushing so that we can have either the best in class, in the industry or even world-class systems that we know will ultimately lead to that food safety culture that we all want. And
Absolutely.
I feel like it's part of our, I'm not going to say obligation, because obligation probably isn't the right word, but responsibility. Because T and I have this perspective since we get to work with different clients that are at different places of leadership, that we get to see some different areas where people are perhaps struggling or are looking to grow and build, right, Tia?
Absolutely. Sometimes, especially thinking about some of our clients that have smaller businesses and
Mhm.
they're looking to grow. Sometimes they don't have full teams, and they might hire someone that is not quite ready for a food safety and quality manager role, but they have a lot of great technical background.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes those managers struggle because they haven't learned how to be business people, right? They haven't learned how to partner with the business, to understand budget, to understand how resources flow. So sometimes they struggle with that. They
Mhm.
don't have the talent yet or the skills yet to be able to influence across the aisle. So that's something that we want to talk about today: how to step into that leadership role.
Yeah, because even though we see people from all these different areas, what T and I did today was kind of narrow it down because we see some common themes. And so those are the perspectives that we want to share and talk about today to see, are you feeling the same things or what other things have we maybe not considered that are helpful to pull in? So as people are watching this or joining us live or even on the replay, really get to take away some value and new ideas on what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
let's jump in. So the first topic we want to talk about is really doing versus leading. So we kind of talked about
Mhm.
earlier on that when new managers or new leaders in the organization step into their role, they really have to switch off the executor
Mhm.
piece, the doing piece, and step more into the leading. And so one thing that some of the terms that I like to use, and I've used in my career, is really understanding that as your role change, your leadership role is changing as well. And I like to look at it as a 4-tier process. And again, I've used this in my career. It's kind of like, if you know me, you know my background, and it just flows through me, right? So when you first join an organization, you're really depending on others. So you're learning about your systems, you're learning about food safety and quality
Mhm.
by talking to people, by connecting with people. You probably have a lot of one-on-ones with people that you're learning about raw materials and HACCP plans and how do we look for foreign material and what are our checks. You're really depending on others to grow your knowledge. Then you kind of move up in responsibility where you're leading by doing. And so
Mhm.
this is the step right before you go into that broader leadership role where you're really contributing individually. You're doing all the reports, you're pulling the data, you are helping maybe a lab tech pull data, you're communicating that data. You're
Mhm.
really at the doing phase. And then you get that promotion and you start to lead through others. And so this is that hard transition where you may no longer be the executor. So you might not be the person that's going out to get the data or structuring a project on how to get something done, but you're leading through that person. So you're
Mhm.
helping them structure it so that they can go do. You're growing their ability to be able to think through a project or think through the type of data that you need. But you're not doing any of the executional work or a small portion of the executional work. And then
Mhm.
after that role, which we're not going to get into that much, but the next role up will be that organizational leadership, where you're now influencing the full organization on food safety and quality because of your role. But the big piece for us today is really to take a look at that leading by doing transition into leading through others.
Mhm. And that's a huge shift. You guys know I like to even just share my own stories about this. And right, I was the probably stereotypical, like, I'm used to doing. I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being in my office one day, because that didn't happen very often, but I was like, wow, people were asking me about doing things and all this. And I was like, honestly, I really don't do a lot. And they looked at me and they said, what? And I'm like, I think I finally made the transition. Like, I
Right.
don't do as much as I think I do because my team is empowered and they are the ones coming up with ideas and doing the work. I'm just trying to help have the shared vision, and I'm helping to make sure I'm clearing hurdles, and I'm helping them leverage their strengths and the things that aren't so great. And it was this amazing moment to be like, I really don't do much.
Right. Right. And that's a really good point. It's so funny that you think about like all the paperwork that you update and you put your name on it, that's like, okay, Tia updated this paperwork.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's a sense of pride, right? Where it's like, okay, this document
Oh,
has been updated, we rolled it out to the floor, I've trained people, I've done this. But as you move into the role of a leader and leading through others, you really should not see your name that much on paperwork, because you should be empowering your team
mhm,
to do that work.
mhm. And it's definitely hard because for a long time, right, there's this notion that doing work means I'm visible. Like,
Hmm.
people see me, people see the reports, I'm the one in front. And when you're leading people, really your role is to have them be the ones in front, them have the visibility, them have making sure they have the credit for doing all that work, because
Right.
they are the ones doing the work.
Absolutely. And when you think about someone that's a leader that might not have direct influence, I think about how I've built sanitation validation plans for my facility, but I'm leaning on a leader that's leading through me at the time,
Mm.
where this person is giving me the background. This is how you structure it. This is what you want to make sure you don't forget. His name may not be on the paper, but he has led through me as the executor to get the work done. So as you step into that broader role and you become that system matter expert on sanitation or on foreign material, whatever it happens to be, you are providing that data to help someone set up their process, so that they're not going to have a food safety incident, right? But you're really leading them to do it, and it's
Mhm.
just it's a different approach.
Yeah, it's different than what we know, which was why, as I saw leaders that were taking on different responsibilities or stepping into maybe a supervisor role or even a manager
Mhm.
role, that was an area that really required some intentional work as their leader to help them make that transition, because otherwise we hang on to stuff we're used to doing. We're used to um, right, just going through those motions and having our to-do list that's a mile long and being focused on getting that done.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like to say to my peers when we were moving into the manager role, and maybe someone on their team thought they were a micromanager, or they were taking their work,
Mm.
I typically say to them, well, whenever you go and you're doing something, is there someone on your team that should be doing that work? Is there someone on your team that can do that work? Is there someone on your team that will benefit from a development standpoint from doing the work? You already know how to do it, right? And you can execute it overnight, you in your sleep, right? But are you taking away a development opportunity from someone on your team when you do that work? If you are, then you're probably micromanaging, right? Or I would say if you're in a meeting with someone on your team and you're doing most of the talking, you're probably taking credit for their work, or at least they feel that way. So you should speak less, listen more, and really make sure that your team members are really speaking to it. Now, if you need to go and correct or add more clarity that your team member might not know, whatever that happens to be, that's a part of the development process, right? But if you find yourself speaking more than your team members that are in the room, they probably feel like you're taking their work or you're micromanaging what they are trying to do.
Yeah. You know, one of the ways that I've worked with my teams and even clients on this is we talk about, if you're the person people come through to for answers, how do you create questions to help explore and be curious? Because that's also one of the signs of being doing versus leading. If you're just giving answers, you're doing the work. You're giving the answers out.
Right.
But how can you step into a space where you can be curious? So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, how do I find that document? I mean, that's an easy one, right? Like, well, where do you think you would look? How do you think you would find that? Where do you think you would go? How do you ask questions and be curious so the other person, you're leading them to help find their own answers versus giving them answers?
I love that. I love that because that will help you even long term, right? Where someone won't come to you and ask the same questions over and over. You're really helping them think through solutions, right? Which is something we talked about in episode 3, where how do we help give solutions and help people find solutions so they won't continue to ask you the same questions, or you won't feel like you're firefighting all the time, right? You want to help give them a process that works, and a part of that process is them thinking about what the solutions are.
Well, and the same thing works, even if it's not like finding a document. So, hey, I think we have too much risk with this ingredient. Hey, I'm curious, what leads you to think that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it can be a simple question so that somebody else gets to do the next step. Like, explain what that means. What does that look like? What led you to think that there may be an additional risk that we haven't considered? So that's part of the leading and asking questions to have someone else be able to do some of the exploration.
Yeah, I love that. And then once that person comes to a recommendation, let them follow through with their recommendation. Let them go through and learn the process. I mean, there's been many times, I've had the opportunity to have a great manager that was amazing at leading through others. So, to watch them help me develop, that looked very different my first year, where it was like, oh, try this and try that and talk to people, right? And I learned that, okay, yes, the team has already tried this before. This is what they learned. Okay, let's move on to the next step. But I'm learning along the way versus my manager giving me those answers. And it's something that has developed me into the leader that I am today. But again, it's around, if you're asking those questions, you're leading. If you're just giving answers, then you're really doing the work when your team should be executing that work and thinking through those solutions and really doing that work.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example because, Tia, as you and I were talking about this, I'm always amazed at our different experiences because of, your background coming through some big food where they had really good systems in place. And I came through some some food companies that, were probably, they didn't have that same maturity. And so, I shared with you too, like often when I would step into a new role, people were like, oh, you're here. They would like throw things at me and be like, good, sink or swim. There wasn't, I would have to think even harder, but I don't recall someone walking through with me to say, hey, where do you think you want to start here? What would that look like?
Mhm.
How do you approach it? Why do you choose those? Those are the things a leader does to help build the next leader. Instead,
Absolutely.
they left it up to me, which, hey, that's a whole different approach for learning and
Mhm.
right, jumped in and did it. But being a leader isn't about just passing that work off. It's really about walking through so that you can do the empowerment. Just flip. And I always chuckle because for a while, empowerment was kind of the like, hot topic, right?
Yeah.
And I always thought, but empowerment is about responsibility in doing that transition. It's not just about like, hey, Tia, yep, you go and you get to decide on all product disposition now.
Right.
That's not setting someone up for success. That's
Exactly.
just passing things down. So leading in those areas, like in that example, would look very different to help empower someone to be ready to make those type of decisions and feel comfortable and confident.
Right. Absolutely. And there might be some people out there that's like, well, I'm at a small company and I might be the only food safety and quality person or one of two, right?
Mhm.
This still works if you're in a leadership position, and even more so where you might be doing more executional work than if you had a team of 10 people, right?
Mhm.
But the goal is for you to still be able to lead cross functionally.
Mhm.
So I've also been in a situation where I'm the only food safety and quality resource, and there's a lot of things that pile up on my plate. And as my role, which should have been more strategic, I really didn't have time to do a lot of the strategic work because
Mhm.
because I did not have the resources. But my goal as a leader was also to figure out what processes existed that I could give to other parts of the organization
Mhm.
to help do, right? What are things that maybe typically a lab technician might do, but someone that's a part of the operations team will do in this case because we don't have any lab techs, right? So thinking through that even as a leader, a sole person in an organization, you still want to think through your tasks and
Mhm.
understand which one should you be doing and which one should you be leading through others, even if those others are not directly a part of food safety and quality. They might be on the operations team or the maintenance team, on the engineering team, whatever it happens to be, because you kind of need that extension because you're the only person.
Mhm.
So think about that in your role if you are, one of three people and your plate is extremely full.
Mhm. Yeah, so we'd love to hear if you have any, comments, insights, stories around this transition of doing versus leading. We'd love to check those out and bring those back in as we're going forward today. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And then one thing before we move on to our second point, I love when you talk about your to-do list because everyone has their to-do list. We
the
know what
to-do
we need to get
list.
done.
It haunts
Typically
us, doesn't it? At
it
times.
it does. And the people that actually struggle from going from doing to leading typically has a very long to-do list. And they're typically on top of their to-do list and they have to check it off. Um, that's what I've seen is that those people are definitely on the like, I gotta do my to-do list type thing.
Mhm.
But I would say if you are in a leader role, take a look at your to-do list.
Mhm.
What's on it? Are you executing a bunch of tasks that, again, your team should be doing that someone can be developing from? Are your tasks things that you already know how to do? You're just doing them because you always have? Or are they development opportunities for you? Doesn't include items like checking in with your team
Mhm.
or following up on a concern or removing a roadblock for your team or checking in with your cross-functional partners to see how the latest program is rolling out. A program that you did not roll out, right? Your team rolled out, but you're checking to understand how that's infiltrating through the culture, and do people have any big feedback that you want to take back to your team? If your items look closer to those, I would say you're on the right track.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Tia. That's something that we work a lot with people on, right? With their standard work. Because
Hmm.
usually when we say, well, let's start writing the list of things that we do, we start with, I'm doing these reports, I'm reviewing these programs, I'm building this, I'm validating that, I'm going to these meetings. Where on that list is I'm taking care of my team?
Right.
Where is it I'm doing check-ins with people who I'm collaborating with?
Hmm.
Those things deserve time, just like all of the other things. In fact, I think as you move through the leadership kind of phases, right? If I'm an early leader and maybe I'm a supervisor or a manager, the amount of doing that I'm doing, like executing, will probably look different than if I'm a director or a VP.
Right.
And that's okay because we know there's always going to be some level of doing within our role. But really, like, how can we challenge ourselves to look at that list and say, have I got caught up in too much of the doing and going here and there, but it's not directly helping my team or collaborating with others?
Yeah, I love that. And that really moves us into our second point
Oh,
is
yeah.
that as you're moving into your role as a leader, you really have to be people centric. You know,
Mhm.
as you move up into the organization, this role of being people centric should continue to grow. You should be focused on people development, building
Mhm.
capabilities, removing barriers so that your people can execute and get work done.
Yeah. And it's so funny because one of my early leaders, Isaac, if you're out there, you know who you are. Others might know Isaac too. But I remember when I first started working with him and he'd be like, Jill, you need to love your people.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and I'll be honest, there was definitely, out of my direct reports, there was, I had the bell curve going. There were some that I'm like, I can love them right now. Then I had others where I'm like, oh, I like them. I like them. I'm totally in the like. And then I had a couple, a few people on the other end where I'm like, you want me to love them? Like, that is going to be a hard sell for me. I don't even like them right now. Which, what a good awareness as a leader to be like, you know what? If I'm not feeling the love for everybody, that's me. That was a
Mhm.
good lesson for me to look at me and say, why am I not? Like,
Yeah.
I need to love everybody on my team because, right, I'm working through people, working with people, I'm helping them develop. So for me, it was a big aha to go, wow, even though I might have challenges or we maybe don't see eye to eye on things, how can I love this person? Because
Yeah.
I want their success just as much as they want it, if not more,
Yeah.
because their success plays into my entire team's success and our entire company's success. I need to love them.
Mhm.
That was a huge wake up call for me.
Yeah. And
Thinking
when
like,
you talk about like loving your team or caring for your team, that means that you have to spend time getting to
mhm,
know them. You
mhm,
know, when I managed my teams, I really understood what they were passionate about, what they loved about their job, what they did not like about their job, what was happening in their personal lives, right? That they wanted to share, if they had kids or
mhm,
animals that they cared about, what they like to do on the weekends, what they love about my leadership style and what they don't like about it, right?
mhm,
Um, all of those things take time to learn, right? And as a
mhm,
leader, that's what your role is. That's a part of your role is to getting to know your people so that you can care about the things that they care about and love the things that they love. So you can know, right? So that you have that common thread. Because in order to be a great leader, you have to have trust on your team, and
mhm,
people do not trust people they don't know, right?
mhm,
So you have to learn to know one another. You have to learn about people, and that takes time. Sometimes during our one-on-one time, we spent so much time talking about their personal lives or what's going on, or they were late
mhm.
yesterday, and it's because something happened in their personal lives that prevented them from getting to work on time. Like, just having that empathy and that sympathy for a person builds that trust and helps you as a leader remove barriers for them and really structure a team in a way to exactly what you said, Jill, so that the whole team can be successful.
Well, and that's a shift, right? I share with you
Mhm.
all the time the shifts that I've had because when I first went into leadership, right? I had this vision of what a leader was supposed to be, right? We're all business. We're supposed to be focused on goals. We're supposed to just drive to the finish line. It's all about data and being technical. Like feelings, we have no place for you. It
Right.
didn't mean that I wasn't nice and that I didn't have feelings. But when I tapped into understanding and being aware of how our feelings play into our whole selves and
Yeah.
really allowing not only for me to show up as my whole self or at least much closer to it.
Mhm.
By doing that, that created the trust for others on my team to also show up like that.
Right.
So when we had, even things that were, I'm going to say, bigger issues, I had a team who would come to me and be like, Jill, I don't see it that way, or
Hmm.
this isn't working. And that was
Absolutely.
all through caring because they knew I wasn't going to be like, well, that sucks. And I don't agree. And we're just going forward. That was a sign of like, wow, okay, what do we need to know more about this? How do we create something that fits for everything that we need? How do we move forward even if it doesn't fit for everybody, but it's for the greater good? It was
Right.
about that trust, building trust that we would be there for each other, that we would have each other's back, that we really had success for all of us in mind, whether that was professional or personal.
Absolutely. And
Mhm,
that's a big thing as you think about building your team and really having a cohesive team of people working well together.
mhm,
Another thing I would say around being people centric is around empowerment. So,
mhm,
I love Duncan's comment in the thread where he said that he found it helpful to stop thinking about giving people instructions about what I want them to do
mhm,
and move forward teaching people how to do what I want them to do, right? So it's moving around, giving them instructions and telling them versus teaching. And I think that's a huge piece. And for
mhm,
me as a leader, one thing that I was really self-aware about is that I might tell someone, oh, I really want to build this SOP around a task, right? And my team will go off and do it, and they'll come back, and then I'm like, oh, it doesn't look exactly the way I want it to look. It doesn't look exactly what's in Tia's mind, right? And I had to think really about, okay, what's the goal, right? The goal is to not have it look exactly the way Tia wants it to look.
mhm,
The goal is, to have a clear SOP around tasks, right? And so giving them a clear goal and having them go out, bring it back, and then really refining, which is really the teaching them on, okay, this is how you would build a SOP here. Like these are things that people value. This is the structure of it. Those are the things that's really important, right? And I'm empowering them to get that work done versus, oh, I don't really like it that it's purple. Let's turn it to orange
mhm,
because I kind of see it as orange because everything else is kind of orange. Like those little things, they don't really matter, right? Like I'm just knocking someone down because I feel like it should look this way versus
mhm.
empowering them to take ownership of this particular SOP. And as long as the goal is done, and that's something that I know I personally had to work on when I first became a manager.
Mhm. And that's, and I think that's a really good point, right? Because it doesn't always have to be our way.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we have to remember about work, right, is we spend so much time there that we also have to have fun. And being people centric as a leader means that you help bring the fun in, or you find the people that kind of help bring the fun in for your team because I mean, right, there are plenty of books and papers out there that even talk about how the art of play plays into not only how we learn, but how we build trust in relationships. It's
Hmm.
how we learn boundaries, it's how we learn things about each other. So having fun, little moments, big moments. Um, for our team, when we started, because we were kind of resetting, and
Hmm.
I had even like found this goofy boat, like a crew boat, with all the rowers,
Yeah.
on a lake, and I superimposed faces onto each of those folks So every meeting we would have this picture of this boat with all of us, and it was ridiculous. It really
Oh
was
my
kind of ridiculously funny. But it was something we all laughed at every time. And we were like, "Yep, we're all in this boat together."
That's so awesome.
So, yes, a little cheesy, but we also in food, well, right, food safety and quality, because I had people across different facilities, we didn't always have the opportunity to be live in person with each other.
Right.
So when we created those moments, which we did on a regular basis, we had definite times where we did, I'm going to say special things, the things that people think are frivolous. Like we would go bowling. We went to a place where it was kind of like bumper cars. We did,
Okay. Yeah,
we
that's
did some
awesome.
things, not all the time, but it was about creating a new way to create bonds and trust across the team. That was
Mhm.
in a way that was a safe space where we didn't have to always be grounded in work.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. I love the fun aspect. It's so funny. I worked in a food safety and quality group, and everyone knew once we got together, there was going to be laughter. They always say, like, oh man, I can tell you guys are having your staff meeting. There's a lot of cackling happening. And it's because we spent that time building trust within the team and getting to know one another. And I mean, we would have some crazy laughs, and like we would prank our manager all the time. At one time we made these we used to call them, my manager is Katrina, so we used to call them Katrina Bucks. We had like dollar bills around with her face on them, and we'd give it out as like prizes, like if people were doing the right thing around food safety and quality. So like that made things fun, right?
yeah.
um, and we were able to express our personalities, and that bubbled over into other groups, right? Because they knew once Tia came in or someone from food safety and quality came in, like we were going to laugh, we were going to have fun,
Mhm.
no matter what's going on, right? Like we're here, and and we would always say, like, when I was in cookies, it's just cookies, right? Like, it's just cookies, it's just yogurt, it's just cakes, like that. That should be fun. Making food should be fun,
Mhm.
even when we're making tough decisions, right? And that's, as a leader, it's your responsibility to bring that fun to a time where your team might feel stressed, or they know they have a lot of things on their list, right? Because if you're not having fun as a leader, they're definitely not having fun,
No,
right?
no, but I think that's a good point because as we transition sometimes into different leadership roles, once again, sometimes we get caught up in this, old school definition of being a leader is about being serious and I'm working on
Right,
goals and I need to be the professional one leading the way. And that's great, right? If that's your definition of leadership, I mean, do you.
right.
But I would always encourage like we all have funny parts in us. I mean, even Sheldon Cooper on Big Bang Theory, I always go back to him. Um, right, there's always funny things, and the more we bring that in, the better it creates bonds, the better it creates trust, the better we even learn. There's so much information about the benefits of fun and play at work.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so our third point is around developing yourself and your team. So, we talked about moving from doing to leading,
Mhm.
right? So like you might not be the full executor on something, you're now leading. You are being people centric, right? So you're making sure that they are getting the development that they need, that you are empowering them to do the work that they need to do, that you're having fun. A piece of that is really making sure that you're setting yourself up and your team up for success.
Mhm.
And that's making sure that you are getting the development that you need, right? And you are providing the resources for your team to get the development that they need. So that starts with being self aware, right?
Mhm.
You need to be aware of the opportunities that you have as a leader, so that you can fill those gaps, as well as the opportunities on your team. So when I gave the example of, when I first started out being a manager, and I thought, man, when someone brought something to me, I'm like, oh, it doesn't look exactly the way I would want it to look. I was aware enough that I knew that was a gap for me. And I knew I could feel it every time it came up, that it's like, man,
Mm.
like, do I need to provide a template? Okay, maybe not. I had those conversations with myself. But it starts with that self-awareness and
Mhm.
understanding, what type of development do you need to get as a leader? And then what do you need to offer for your team in order for you all to be successful?
Yeah, maybe it's the coaching part in me, but of course, the more I work in this space, the more I see that the power of being a good leader really comes through self-awareness
Hmm.
about where you're spending your time, how you're interacting with others, how you're staying curious. Because if you're not able to stay in that space, you're also not able to create the culture where your team is also creating self-awareness, which helps them grow. And
Yeah.
it's really about that openness. And I love, Robert, that you have, right? Our team members are the heart and soul of an organization. And so having that awareness starts with us as leaders when we transition, but it also then extends out to our team so that we can really, shine as we're the heart and soul.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're working on self awareness for yourself and being aware of your team's opportunities, you are then helping your team become more self aware,
Mhm,
right? Which again, it's about leading and really teaching them how to become a leader for the future.
mhm.
And you want them to be able to be self aware when they get into a leadership role. So, you want to spend time here really learning yourself and learning your team.
Yeah, and I know we don't have it today, but it's the Johari Square that kind of talks about these different levels of like your awareness versus others' awareness in these different ways. Because right, you
Yeah.
can have things that you need to maybe work on that you aren't even aware of, and nobody else is either.
Hmm.
So figuring out how you draw some of those things out can take some time, but it starts with knowing that you actually even want to do that.
Yeah, and the Johari test that you're talking about is completely free online. We can find a link to it and put it in the comments. Because it's something that I've done with my teams before, instead of going out and doing a full Myers Briggs.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's about understanding, where your blind spots are and what people perceive you as. And that test is really around self-awareness. So we'll make sure we find it and put in the
Mhm.
comments after the episode. Thanks, Jill, for bringing that up, because I mean it's definitely a tool I've used, and it's a tool to get the conversation started on your team.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love Duncan that you said, right, developing yourself and your team in this learning is a two-way street.
Hmm.
Um, and once again, that was a good learning for me because putting a program together, I was about how do I make this be perfection? Like I felt like I needed to have it be perfect to be able to present it to others. And it wasn't until I started being a better leader that I learned that's not how it works, right? How do you share the concept? How do you do catchball back and forth? Like, hey, I have an idea about this. What do you think? And then they respond and go, that could be good, but what about this? And you keep
Hmm.
going back and forth. And that's how you learn better together and develop the whole team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we talk about onboarding for this role,
Mm,
I love talking about this, Jill, because you've spent a lot of time
I have.
doing this over the last couple of years as the food safety coach. And so I love it when you kind of talk about like onboarding for food safety and quality. It's really more than what you get from a HR onboarding and then a list of people that you need to talk to, and a list of projects that you're going to start to execute, right?
Yeah.
Really, food safety and quality, when you're really looking at developing yourself and your team, onboarding into this leadership role is different. And there's some things you should be thinking about, right?
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes I think we're so eager to jump in, which is fantastic. That's what I love about being in food safety and quality. We all just want to get in there and make a difference and help make things better. But I think the other part is, once again, doing that transition. If you haven't had someone who's helped you understand, like we need to be clear on expectations, not just the explicit ones, but the implicit, the ones that people don't necessarily tell you about that you really need to know. Now,
Hmm.
it sounds maybe a little bit elementary, but even things like, do we actually leave to go to lunch or are we supposed to work through lunch? Like, what's the expectation here? And I know that sounds crazy, but I have seen that become a touch point for people who we have flare ups because of the expectations. Like, why aren't you working through lunch to get that done? Versus somebody going, I need to have this break because I need a mental break and I need to
Right.
refuel and recharge.
Right.
So the onboarding that we do, it starts with all of these basic parts so that you can really build from expectations to your standard work to, we all talk a lot about like who's the circle around you that's supporting you and that you're collaborating with. Like, how are you being intentional in finding out who they are and setting up time with them?
Mhm.
How are you showing up as a leader? Because if you haven't been intentional about how I'm showing up today for work, people may not know what to expect. And it's our job as leaders to show up and be ready to explore, be curious, and help have some energy for our team. So we walk through a whole different list of things that I have never seen in an HR or even a team onboarding program. And that's what I love doing because people go, oh, I wish I had this when I was first starting out. Oh, I
Yeah.
wish I had this when I was an early leader. And that's why, because I've heard that way too often and that transition is hard. And this helps make that easier.
Hmm. Absolutely. And then when you think about like setting these expectations up early and learning the norms of your organization and who you should connect with inside and outside of
Mhm.
food safety and quality, that's really starting to develop that trust that we've
Mhm.
been talking about, right? And that transparency that leads to trust that you and the organization is getting on the same page about what a leader looks like early
Mhm.
on, so that when you are you, right, and you're being the leader that you are, you're not breaking trust along the way. You're really building that trust because you're having those conversations early on. So I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, well, and part of setting ourselves up for success, right, is about being proactive in what we're doing. If we sit back and wait for these things to come to us, well, it ends up on our to-do list. Like, oh, here's another thing I have to do. Versus, I'm going to step into my role and I'm going to learn what these expectations are. I'm going to be proactive and ask the right questions. I'm going to learn about how my budget works. Do I have a budget? How do I do expenses? I'm going to learn about what are the things we do here from a legal standpoint. Like, are
Mhm.
there guidance from our organization on how we handle communication or emails, or even my role in what I could be held liable for? Those are
Yeah.
things that, as food safety quality leaders, we haven't often had conversations around. But we see how the industry is changing, and we need to really set people up for success to know some of these things as they're moving into roles or before they move into roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really around, doing this type of onboarding is really setting yourself up for success
Mhm.
and setting your team up for success.
Yeah.
So
And
you might not, oh, go
that's,
ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say, and that's all about developing yourself and your team, right?
Right.
Like, how do we do this as we're transitioning as leaders? Because we do have a lot on our plate, but the plate can also be manageable.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so I was going to say, these are awesome tips that you should take back with you and think about how you may want to change the way you are leading, or even to say, yeah, I do that. I spend time with my team and know that you're going down the right path, right? If you need more information or want to see this in action, like learn from others,
Mhm.
like network with other people inside and outside of food safety and quality. That's one thing about being a leader. A lot of the attributes are able to go across functions, right? Like it's not just food safety and quality. Of course, our technical, you know, soundness is in food safety and quality, but really how to be a leader and how to show up as a leader. Those attributes, you'll see those in all areas of the organization. So,
Mhm.
learn from others, use your network. At one point, Jill and I, we were on a presentation. We kind of broke down like the 4 different people you should have in
Mhm.
your network, where you have a leader that inspires you. Who's someone that you can look at and say, wow, they're such a great leader. I want to be that type of leader one day. Learn from them, get on their
Mhm.
calendar, meet with them once a month, and talk about these things and talk about, even times where it's like, man, I don't think I handled that properly. I'm not really sure what to do. Well, reach out to that person that inspires you, to say, hey, how would you have handled this differently? Have a mentor that's advising you on how to move down your path and kind of look out for things that are coming down the road, right? Because most likely they've been in your position
Mhm.
before. And then we talk about having a sponsor, which is really someone that's advocating for you, ensuring that you're getting those development opportunities, right, to set you up for success within this role, but also into the future. And then we always like to call out the coach, because people forget about the coach
Mhm.
aspect of things, but really a coach helps you discover that self-awareness, right? Like we were talking about, it really helps you discover who you are, who you want to be, what your values are, which ultimately, what we talked about, leads to building that trust within your organization and on your team.
Mhm. Yeah, and once again, I love how all these parts come back together because it's about how do we fully step into being the leader we need to be.
Mhm.
So, what's the one area that's calling to you to say, "Hey, I could fully step into this differently," or "I want to explore this a little bit more to see
Yeah.
how could that make a difference for our team." We would love to know what that looks like for you because the more we share, the more we understand like how we can help each other and where some of those, like we talked about, blind spots are in helping us move forward so that we really can be the leaders that we want to be because we do amazing work and we have
Yes.
amazing teams. And so the more we step into our role, the more everybody shines and everybody really fills that mission that we're hoping to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with that, we are excited that you all joined us
Mhm.
today. We do like to put up our email. Let us know how we can support you in this area. If there's things that you all are, you might need some help with, or say, like, man, I always run into this issue, or I'm not sure why my team do not trust me. Email us about it. We
Mhm.
would love to hear from you, and how we can support you in these efforts.
Absolutely. And whether it's something direct or if it's something where we love ideas to say, what do you want to hear about on a LinkedIn Live? So that we
Yes.
can do real talk food safety with things that you're like, that's what I need to hear about today. So
Absolutely.
we'd love to know.
Absolutely. Yes. So if you
Awesome.
have any questions or if you have any of those ideas, we would love for you to throw it out in the comments. We will definitely get you the link to the Jahari test, because I think that is so great. So we'll put that in the comments later on today. If you're watching on replay, you can watch the replay on LinkedIn or join subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of our episodes will be there under Catalyst LLC YouTube. So we're super excited to have these available to you to come back and listen
Anytime.
to and write down some comments and how you want to execute it in your role.
Hmm. Yeah. And, as we go forward, just a little teaser, we are setting up some guests. So we are excited because we'll be enriching what we're doing here on LinkedIn Live with some other voices as well. So we
Yes.
can't wait to share that with you as we move forward.
Yes, we love the aspect of better together, right?
Mhm.
Which is exactly what this talk is about. It's about bringing together our ideas and talking through the realness of food safety and
Mhm.
quality and how do we help each other solve the roadblock of getting to a sustainable food safety and quality culture, right?
Mhm.
So we are looking forward to some guests in the future. So definitely keep your eyes open for that one. We're
Yep.
excited about that.
Awesome. Otherwise, well, thank you everyone for joining us again today. We love having you here and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Yes. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.